Hello and welcome. My name is Enrique Levin, co-founder and VP of Product at Zintro. Zintro is a global platform that makes it easy for companies to start conversations with highly specialized experts, consultants, contractors, and job candidates about potential phone consults, projects, or even employment opportunities. Specialization spans all industry sectors, disciplines, job functions, and geographies. Today's webinar, Breaking Out of a Dry Spell, Embracing the Future of Independent Expertise, will be presented by Katy Tynan, partner at MindBridge Partners. Katy is the author of Practical Guides to Career Transitions, as well as a speaker and consultant in How Work is Evolving. She advises organizations on how to leverage the free agent workforce and integrate independent professionals with internal teams. Katy is an expert in how the employer-employee relationship is changing and how individuals, businesses, and educational institutions need to adapt to the evolving landscape of work. Over her 20-year career in IT and operations consulting, Katy has advised hundreds of organizations on how to find practical, sustainable solutions leveraging technology and human capital for competitive advantage. Katy has been part of multiple successful startup exits, including Winphoria Networks, acquired by Motorola in 2003, and Thrive Networks, acquired by Staples in 2007. In 2013, Katy founded MindBridge Partners to provide strategic advice and guidance to organizations and educational institutions as they manage through business model transitions and organizational growth. Katy is the author of Survive Your Promotion, the 90-Day Success Plan for New Managers, and her most recent book, Free Agent, the Independent Professional's Roadmap to Self-Employment Success. If you would like to ask Katy any specific questions, feel free to use the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. If you can't see it, just click on the orange arrow on the top right corner of your screen, and you should see a question section. Feel free to write questions at any point through the webinar. Katy will respond to questions after the presentation, so stay tuned. We will also be providing Katy's Zintro ID and her profile link so that you can follow up with her. Without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our presenter, Katy Tynan.
Well, thank you so much, Enrique, and thanks everybody for joining. I'm glad to have you here with us to talk today about breaking out of a dry spell, and the dreaded dry spell, which all of us who have been independent consultants and independent experts have gone through at some point when we're working for ourselves. So today we're going to talk about how they happen, and we're going to talk about what a dry spell is, why it sometimes happens to you, to me, to all of us. And we're also going to talk about the process, what it feels like when you're experiencing that lull and that dry spell in your business, and what sort of things you need to do to shift your mindset so that you can get right back up and start getting new clients again. And then we're going to go forward with talking about some really practical strategies and solutions for getting out of that dry spell and getting back into the groove and getting things done. And some of those strategies are short-term and some of them are long-term. And then finally, we're going to cover the discussion about income droughts, which really underpins this dry spell idea, the idea that a lot of us think about our work as client-facing dollars per hour workflows, but we also want to think about how we can create some recurring revenue streams and some other ways to generate income that will allow us to navigate through our daily life and not get stuck in some of these dry spells. And then I'm going to sum it up, and we're going to have some Q&A, and I'd love to hear from everybody who's here today to talk about what you're struggling with particularly and what kind of things you've done to break out of dry spells. I think it is very independently specific. Sometimes things that work for me won't work for you, and sometimes things that work for you won't work for me. So we can all share some great ideas and share some of our experiences and help figure out how to manage through this. So let's get right into it, and let's talk about feeling stuck with not having clients. And I want to talk about feeling like you're the only person who has no clients right off the bat. So this infographic piece was from a piece of research that was done last year, and you can see 41.8% of freelancers say that finding clients consistently is their biggest challenge. I think a lot of people tend to think that this is a problem that's unique to them, especially when you're just starting out as a freelancer or when you're just getting up and running and you go out and you find a client or two, but it's a real struggle to do that. And you look around at other people, particularly the people you find inspiring, the people that you look at who have great profiles on LinkedIn, who have hundreds of contacts, and who have, you know, those beautiful logos all over their websites that show all of these great large Fortune 500 high-profile companies they've worked with, and they really project the idea that they're constantly very busy and always on the success track. It's really easy to feel demotivated when you look at other people, because as consultants and as experts, any brand strategist will tell you you need to project that you are very busy, that you do have high demand, and that you are an expert that people come to regularly on your particular area of expertise. So we have this world-facing brand perspective where we say that we're very busy, where we say that we have a lot going on, and everyone is doing that. But I don't know how many of you follow Chris Brogan, who is an excellent thought leader and person who talks about working for yourself and working independently and doing the work that's really unique to you. He released the results of a poll he did with his newsletter mailing list, which is humongous. And 85% of the people who follow Chris Brogan responded to his poll. 85% said that they struggle to earn enough income or to earn the amount of income that they really want. So when you're thinking about not having clients or not having income or not having the right pipeline of clients and income, it can feel very isolating. You can feel like you're alone. But the reality is that this is a common situation for people working independently. It's a common situation for people who work for themselves, whether they're entrepreneurs or whether they're independent consultants or however you position yourself. It's very common to have trouble finding the right flow of clients and having that flow be consistent over time. And that's one of the things we'll talk about a little more later on in this webinar, is how to make that more consistent. But I wanted to start off by saying, if you feel this way, if you have struggled with finding clients and with dry spells, it is definitely not something that is unique to you. So what is a dry spell? And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about a couple of days where you don't have client work to do. I think, in fact, many of us who work for ourselves and work independently enjoy some of those lulls when you have a whole bunch of client work for a week or so, and then maybe you have a couple days where you have nothing scheduled, and those are ups and downs that are part of the flexibility and the work-life balance that you can have when you work for yourself. So I'm not talking about the times when you have a little short spell of no work. I'm really talking about something that feels different, that sinking down into a dry spell, and it's a loss of confidence that comes with that. You suddenly start to question, where does my work come from? And I don't have any, and why is it that I don't have any billable work right now? And there's really three different types of business droughts or dry spells. You can have a lack of billable work, meaning you have a lack of dollars per hour client work. You can also have a lack of income, and those are two really different things, and we're going to talk about that a little more. And then finally, you can have gaps between clients, or you can have what I refer to as inefficient scheduling, which usually comes from setting your prices too low, that you have a situation where you have some work, but you don't have enough work, but you're too busy to go out and get more work, and so you feel sort of like you're constantly in that cycle of it's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough, and that can be very frustrating. So those are the three main types of things that we think of when we think about a dry spell and when we think about not having enough work and a business drought. And the first thing that happens when you start to have a dry spell is you ask yourself the question, why is this happening? Why is it happening to me? Why is it happening to me right now? Why can't I find work? And this goes back to what I said at the very beginning. It's easy to think that you're the only one that has this problem, but we all struggle with it. So it's not something that's happening that's unique to you, and it's not something that you can't fix or come back out of. But the main reason that dry spells happen, the main reason that we get into this situation is because we're focusing on the wrong things. So the very first thing that happens typically when somebody starts to work for themselves is that they go out and get a client or two or three. And in the beginning, you accept all kinds of work, and particularly you may accept work that's not quite in your wheelhouse, but you'll do it because you can do it. You'll do it because you need the money, and you'll do it because you want to have those clients and those referrals. But then you get heads down, and you start focusing on that work in front of you, and you stop thinking about where your work came from. You stop doing some of the things that we all know we need to do. Maybe we don't like to do them, but marketing and social media and networking and going out and constantly going through that grind of putting out our expertise and demonstrating that we have something that other people need. So when we have this focus on the work in front of us, when you spend so much time trying to do really great work, you stop focusing on that pipeline. You stop focusing on the things that you need to do, and you start focusing on trading all of your time for money. And when I talk to people who are getting started in freelancing and working for themselves, and they ask me, Katy, how do I set my rates? How do I know how much to charge? One of the first mistakes that people make is they set their prices too low. They set their prices with an expectation that if they trade all of their time for that hourly rate, that they'll end up where they want to be from an income perspective. But for the most part, if you are selling yourself as an expert, you need to spend a bunch of time writing and speaking and putting yourself out there and marketing and doing social media and networking and talking to people about who you are and what you do. And that takes up about 50% of your time. So that's why you typically see consulting rates looking like about double the hourly rate that you would expect to pay someone to do the work. And that's because in order to be a consultant and also to run your own business, in order to trade in that expertise economy, you really need to have that level of 50-50 that you're focusing on the billable work as opposed to building out your business. And this is going to happen if you're a solo professional. Typically, if you start to build up a good book of business, you do have the ability to hire some people to do some of the things that you don't necessarily love to do, and that's a good strategy. Or you can band together in groups, and there are a lot of industry groups and small groups of specific experts who come together to create consulting groups such that people can find them for expertise and they can leverage one another to keep that pipeline going. But if you're focusing all your time on trading time for money, you're not spending enough time building out that pipeline and getting ready to have consistent work. Now, it's not all bad news, and I want to point this out, and I'm not going to make this whole webinar a depressing thing. We're going to get to the positive part in a minute. But the first positive thing is that when you don't have work, you have the ability to do some things that you can't do when you're busy, even if you're busy doing the right things, even if your balance is right. You can update your website and your social media presence. You can go through your business model and say, wow, I've been thinking about selling my expertise in this way. What new tools have evolved? What new processes exist? What new situations are out there that some of my competitors or some of the other colleagues that I have in this field are doing that look interesting to me? So you've probably seen this is a very recent interesting piece. Everybody is doing podcasts. They're doing courses. People are creating content that they can sell. And they can sell that content while they're sleeping. They can sell that content and create recurring revenue streams. So taking some time when you have a gap in your business to evaluate your business model, to create some content, to do some other things, is actually a really healthy thing to do. You can also take a break. I think it's really easy for people who work for themselves to start to get burnt out from time to time. You really start to spend so much time on your business and so much time with your clients and not enough time walking in the woods, taking a deep breath, remembering why you chose to go down this career path. So do spend some time, if you have some time off, doing some self-care and taking care of yourself, because that's something that sometimes we don't have time to do when we're busy. And of course, volunteering, learning something new, remembering that there are other things that go on in life outside of the work that we do. And truthfully, that balance should exist in your working life all the time. But sometimes it takes a break to remind you that those things are important and valuable. So I want to talk a little bit about the path that gets us to dry spells, because there's some commonalities here, and I said having the focus on doing your day-to-day work is one of the big factors that will get you into a dry spell, and that's true. But there are some other things that happen that typically will pull people into a cycle of what I would call negativity, a cycle of lack of confidence, a cycle of frustration and sort of feeling down on yourself. And you know really perfectly well that your business and your ability to sell is really dependent on your ability to believe in yourself. So when you get too busy and you start to try to do too much, one of the things that often happens is you have a bad client experience, whether it's a project that goes off the rails, that all of a sudden you're comping 1,000,000 hours, or whether it's a client that you really thought you loved and you really thought they loved you, and then they went another direction. And those sort of incidents that happen can really cause you to pull back and feel like, oh, maybe I'm not as good at this as I thought I was, or wow, maybe I shouldn't be out there saying I'm an expert. And this is something that happens a lot. You can read about it. There's been quite a bit of research done on it, something called imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is when you feel like you're a fraud, when you're out there saying, I'm the #1 expert in how work is evolving, and then somebody comes to you and says, do you have a PhD? What are you trading on? Why do you think you're the #1 expert in this? And you start to feel like, wow, maybe I should not be the person out there saying I know everything. And particularly when you're trading on your expertise, this lack of confidence in your own capabilities can be deadly in terms of trying to find new clients. So this path, what it leads to is a problem with your sales mindset, because you are typically the salesperson as well as the execution person. When you have a positive sales mindset, you're confident, you're value-driven, you're sitting with your potential clients and you're saying to them, how can I help you? And you know the value of your expertise, you know the value of your work, and when you present like that, people who are potential customers feel drawn to you. They want to work with you because here's someone who can help, here's someone who understands their needs, here's someone who can solve their problems. But when you start to feel negatively about your own capabilities or negatively about your ability to land work, you start to feel anxious, and you can get into this bad mindset of feeling desperate and pushy. And I will tell you that clients can sense desperation from miles away. And you know from having felt it from people who were trying to sell you things that desperate, pushy people don't feel like people that you want to work with. And so when you start to tense up and you start to feel like you don't have enough work, you don't have the right kind of work, you're going to have to go back and get a job, oh no, or you're not going to be able to do this work that you love, you start to shift to the right-hand side of this, and that shows in your sales process. It shows because clients are going to say, no, I don't really want to work with this person. I want to work with someone who's confident and who's here to help me and who understands my needs. So as you start to think about getting through a dry spell, one of the things that you may need to do is engage with somebody to help you remember why you're great at what you do. And one of the ways that you can do that is, and I certainly encourage this for everybody who works for themselves, you should have a group of people who are also independent professionals that you get together with, whether it's once a month, whether it's once a quarter, but it should be your team. This is your tribe, and you need to support each other because everybody's going to go through these periods when you feel frustrated, and there's nothing that makes you feel better like sitting down with someone who gives you a wake-up call and says, you know what, Katy, you're better than this. You can do this work, and you can do the right work, and you just need to focus on your priorities and the great work you've done, and they can remind you of some of the great stuff that you've done. So when you feel yourself sinking down into this anxiety-driven mindset, you need to pull yourself up out, and if you can't do it yourself, you need to go to your team and say, help me out here, guys, because otherwise you do get sort of stuck in this bad place. And there's something else that happens when you're not working, is that you have this illusion of control. And I'm going to play a short clip from the movie Kung Fu Panda. If any of you have seen it, it is a wonderful, fabulous movie. But this is just a short little clip. And I think it's so relevant to how we feel when we're in this stuck place. So let's see if we can do this. And I'm just going to fast forward to the spot where it starts.
Thrice. My old friend, the panda will never fulfill his destiny, nor you yours, until you let go of the illusion of control. Illusion? Yes. Look at this tree, seafood. I cannot make it blossom when it suits me, nor make it bear fruit before its time.
But there are things we can control. I can control when the fruit will fall. And I can control where to plant the seed. That is no illusion, Master.
Ah, yes. But no matter what you do, that seed will grow to be a peach tree. You may wish for an apple or an orange, but you will get a peach.
But a peach cannot defeat Tai Lung.
Maybe it can, if you are willing to guide it, to nurture it, to believe in it.
But how? How? I need your help, Master.
No, you just need to believe. Promise me, Shifu.
The issue that happens when we're stuck in a dry spell is that we feel like we control everything. We feel like if we're not getting work, it's our fault. That if I don't have the right clients or I don't have the clients I need, that's because everything I'm doing is wrong. And when I have clients, I feel like that's because I'm doing the right things. But of course, the reality is we don't control everything. We can't control everything. And so when you try to control everything in your world, you may be doing a lot of the right things and they're not working. And when that happens, you say, oh, I need to stop doing that and do something else. So when you think about being stuck and you think about being in a dry spell, one of the things that's important is to recognize that you're doing the right things even if they're not working 100% the way you expect them to or 100% the way you want them to. So you have to remind yourself that there are things that are in your control and there are things that are not. So you cannot control whether that perfect client is going to walk in the door tomorrow. You cannot control whether the next client you get is going to be exactly the work that you want to do. But what you can control is your own branding, your own messaging, and then your own ability to consistently commit to pushing your expertise forward, to putting yourself out there, and to looking for the right kind of work, as well as doing the things that you need to do outside of the specific work, meaning getting your brand positioning to be correct, going out and talking to people, taking care of yourself, having your work-life balance, and remembering that you really like what you do. But what you can't do is panic. And a lot of people do when they have the situation where first they have not quite enough work, and then they have really not quite enough work, and then they have no work at all. They start to feel panicky, and all of a sudden all of the good and right things that they've been doing for all this time that got them the original clients, they stop. So maybe they say, oh, this Twitter thing is stupid. I don't get any clients from Twitter. I'll stop putting anything out on social media. Or I really need to completely revamp everything that I'm doing and throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over again. And the reality is some of the things you're doing right now are the right things, whether you're getting clients or not. And some of the things you're doing right now are not the right things. And there are things that you're not doing that you should be. So it's a good idea to look at what you're doing. It's a good idea to rethink what you're doing. But it's certainly not a good idea to panic and say, oh my goodness, I should never have picked this as a career. I should never have done this. I can't do this work. So now let's get into the real nitty-gritty of restarting your pipeline. And I want to start talking about some of these practical ways that you can re-engage clients, that you can start to create new content, that you can start to get yourself out there even if you're not making money for it. And these are the ways that you're going to kickstart your pipeline. Now, some of these are short-term strategies. Some of these are things that you can do that have the potential to quickly turn around business. And then others of them are real long-term strategies that you should be doing all the time. So it is important, and I'll talk about each of them in their turn as whether they're a short-term strategy or a long-term strategy, but it's important to have both of those strategies going at the same time. And it's important to understand the difference between what's going to get you clients today and what's not going to get you clients for maybe 3 to 6 months, but is still important work to do. So your past clients, the clients that you've already done work for, these are really the very first people that you should reach out to at any time that you start to feel like your pipeline is drying up. And it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, that you should not wait until your pipeline is completely dry before you start these activities. If you start to feel like things are dragging a little or going a little slowly, or you have a client that's not signing and you've been spending a lot of time on it, that's the time to spin up some of these activities and kickstart that pipeline before it becomes a real problem. So why are your past clients such a great place to turn to for a quick turnaround? Because it's an established relationship. They know you. They've already bought something from you before. They already understand your value and your expertise, and hopefully you did a fantastic job the last time that you were working with them. So because you have that established relationship, they're much more likely to say yes when you call them up. Now, just as a strategy, you should not call them up and say, gosh, I don't have any work. Do you have any work for me? The best strategy when you're going back to your previous clients is to put out there that, you know, you have some time opening and you had some questions about whether they had any needs, or you call them up and say, you know, because I understand your business cycle and I know that the last time I worked with you, you were in this place and I heard XYZ, which I thought would be really interesting. Do you want to consider it? But really approaching those previous clients because you know them allows you to do a better job of selling yourself to them. And then even if they don't need you right now, they're a great source of referrals and testimonials because, again, they have worked with you, so they know you and they can vouch for your expertise. And nothing is more valuable than having a happy client who says, you know who you need this person, because they're the person who's really going to get you from point A to point B in the way that you need. So your very first short-term strategy for going after new business is to go right back to your previous clients. What if you don't have any? What if you've not done any work and you're just getting your business off the ground? Well, that's when you need to go to your friends, your previous employers. People who have known your work in the past are really good sources for new work for you. And in fact, typically most people who are just getting started in consulting get started by getting work from either a previous employer or from somebody who knows them and who wants to choose to buy from them. So start there. It's your absolute best strategy. The second strategy is a little bit more of a long-term play, but it's critical when you think about getting out of this feast or famine cycle. So what's the feast or famine cycle? It's what every consultant experiences, and we've been talking about it, which is when you have work, you tend to attract more work. When you're successful, when you're confident, when you're talking about the great things you're doing, when you're enthusiastic about the work that you're doing, you're going to attract more work to you, and honestly, you're going to attract more work than you can handle. So then you start turning work away and saying, I'm too busy, I don't have time, I can't schedule you until February. And at that point, you start to have a little bit of a decline because you're focusing too much on the work in front of you, and ultimately you may drop back down into that famine situation where you don't have work. So to get out of that, what you really need to do is create some kind of a baseline of recurring revenue. And the way that you do that is by taking your expertise and turning it into something you can sell. So whether that's a book, whether that's a webinar, whether that's a course, whether that's a licensing agreement where you're creating something for someone else that they're turning around and selling and including, whatever strategy you choose, content is the way to create a revenue stream that is not dependent on you doing dollars per hour work. And what that content strategy allows you to do is two things. It allows you to put out your expertise and continue to grow your expertise, again, even when you're working, but it also allows you to have that cushion of income, that consistent revenue stream that's outside of your dollars per hour work. So discounts and pro bono work. I'm going to say they're a great strategy here, but I'm also going to say be a little careful. So one of the things that a lot of people do, either early on when they're just starting out in getting into expertise-based consulting, is they give away their expertise for free, either in the sales process or because they want to go out and get some work and they need some testimonials and they need some referrals, so they go to an organization and say, can I work with you for free? And if you have nothing else on your plate, it's not a bad strategy, but it can be really dangerous because people get used to not paying for what you're offering them, and at that point you can get into a cycle of thinking that your own work has no value. So when you think about trying to use discounts to break out of a dry spell, to break out of a period where you don't have enough work, you want to do it carefully. So the first thing you want to do is make it limited time. So go ahead and create a flyer for some piece of work that you can do, whether it's an assessment or whether it's some kind of consultation, however you want to position it, but make it limited time. And there's two reasons to do that. First of all, because it's discipline on your part to say, I'm not giving this away forever. And second of all, because it creates a sense of urgency in your potential buyers. So people who see limited time say, oh gosh, I better jump right on that. It's marketing 101. So make sure that anytime you're giving your work away for less than face value, you're doing it for a set period of time, and then hold yourself to that. So don't extend your discounts for an extra day or week or month just because you didn't quite get enough. The second piece is don't give away your very best work. So typically, when you're consulting based on your expertise, you are the one that has value, and most of that value is in your knowledge base, in your connections, in your understanding of systems and processes. So it's fine to give away a white paper. It's fine to give away a short piece, an hour-long consultation. But when you're doing real work, when you're doing real valuable work, you really don't want to ever give that away. So go ahead and say to a potential client, look, I can do this for a discount because it's local work or it's attractive work to me or whatever, but don't give that away for free. And furthermore, when you're creating content, if you're going to create content for people, you want to be a little careful of creating content as work for hire. And this is something I think a lot of us get into. Work for hire is when you are creating something for someone else and then they own the work product at the end. If you can retain ownership and copyright of the work that you create and then allow people to use it in a licensing fashion, it's much, much better for you. So again, really try to not give away your best work, but give away wedge products or loss leaders. And wedge products and loss leaders are ways to get yourself in the door. So a wedge product might be an assessment. It might be something you can do in an hour or two that gives someone a sample of what you're capable of, that shows them that you understand what they need and that you can deliver on it. And those are great products to give away at a discount, to give away it for free, or to send out to industry groups and say, hey, does anybody need this? Because it gets your foot in the door, and especially when they're at a reasonable cost. And loss leaders, again, are products or services that you're going to give away and you expect that you're going to lose a little money on them. So let's say you're going to get paid $500 for something that really typically should cost $1,000, and you're really just going to break even in terms of travel, in terms of time you spend, in terms of your business expenses. Those products are great if they lead to more business. But just having a product that doesn't have a good follow-up and doesn't have a good way for people to connect and continue to do business with you, those are things that will just become time sucks, and you'll really feel like you're spinning your wheels. And then the last piece on this page, becoming a mentor. I can't stress enough, if you have expertise, that you should be looking in your area for accelerated programs. You should be looking for organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and like CWE, the Center for Women in Enterprise. Many of these organizations are looking for mentors. So let's say you're an accountant, or you're an attorney, or you're someone like me, you're a business operations consultant. Whatever your expertise is, becoming a mentor allows you to engage with somebody on a reasonable basis. You're not going to go and do their work for them, but you are working with them and providing them some advice and guidance. And the likelihood that sooner or later they're going to actually need more of your expertise is pretty high. You also get great visibility becoming a mentor, because typically, if you're talking about accelerated programs like Mass Challenge, they publish all their mentors. And so all of the people who engage with them will see who you are and what your expertise is. So it's a great strategy. Again, half of these are short-term strategies. So putting out limited time offers, going ahead and creating wedge products, those are great ways to get business in the short term. Becoming a mentor, doing some of those are longer term strategies. So both of these need to be a part of your toolkit for how you get business and how you sustain business over time. So then the next one is a two-part, which is partnering up. And this is a great short-term strategy. If you're struggling with finding business, you need to go and look at what your ideal clients also buy in addition to your services. Because if you can find some other people who deliver services that are adjacent to what you do, they sell into the same types of businesses, they sell into the same types of value propositions, it's a great way to partner up and say to someone, look, you do this, I do that, let's get together and create a combined package, and that allows you to sell against much larger organizations. So it's a good way to find out what else your clients buy and what else they need. You also have a great opportunity to find people that you like to work with. So one of the downsides to working for yourself is that typically you work alone a lot of the time. So finding people that you like to work with and then partnering up with them to do work is a great thing to do. So this model, I just want to bring up here, it's actually a coaching model, and the idea is that you have 4 levels of work that you can do. There's work that you're incompetent at. So when I'm running my business, I don't do my own taxes because I'm not good at doing my own taxes. Could I do them? Not very well. So I consider myself incompetent at doing some of those financial pieces, and I really shouldn't be focusing my time there. There are things I'm competent at. So I'm competent at creating brochures and doing some of those things. I'm not great at it. It's not a terrific use of my time, but I can do it. And then there are things that I'm really excellent at, things I can get paid good money to do. I may or may not really enjoy it. It may or may not be my very best work, but I'm good at it. But the real top of this pyramid, and if any of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a social psychology construct, your unique ability is the top of the pyramid. It's the place where you are doing something that you're really great at, that you love to do, that adds super value. So why am I talking about this in the context of partnering up? Because when you think about partnering, you're really bringing your excellent or your unique capabilities to the table, and then allowing someone else who has capabilities where you're competent or incompetent to get together with you to create some kind of a package that has tremendous value for a client. So one of the typical places I see this is researchers and graphic designers. So economists and researchers love data, and they're really, really good at gathering and parsing and slicing and dicing data. But then they put a whole bunch of numbers onto a spreadsheet and hand it to a client and say, there you go, there are your results. And typically the client wants to see a visual presentation. But many, many people who are researchers are not good at creating those beautiful infographic style visuals. So partnering up with someone who has an adjacent skill or has a skill that really complements your own is a terrific way to get more business and to be able to provide more value to your clients. Partnering up is a really good short-term solution. It's also a really good long-term solution. You want to find those people that you work well with, that you have those compatible skills with, because it's a terrific way over the longer term to make sure that you're consistently getting work and that you're not doing work that you shouldn't do. The other strategy you need is to narrow your focus. I think a lot of us, when we think about not having enough work, we think about widening the net. Why not tell people, I do everything? But really, you need to narrow. And the reason you need to narrow is because when you're the exact right person for a client, when you have the exact right expertise, people buy from you much more easily. So where to find them? Reference USA and the Chamber of Commerce I have listed here. When you've defined your perfect client, when you've really narrowed it down, so instead of saying, you know, I work with all kinds of different companies and I can help you with marketing, if you can instead say, I work with companies from 1 to 3 million in revenue, and particularly professional services companies or particularly manufacturing companies, if you can show that niche expertise, you can really do a great job of selling to a company that you're the exact perfect person for them. And that's a much better sales proposition than, again, going broad and saying, I do all kinds of different things. So Reference USA is a database. If you have a library card, you can get access to it, and it allows you to filter companies by those metrics in order to find ideal potential clients to target in your location. And then again, the Chamber of Commerce is a very underutilized resource, but they know who's there and what those companies do and how big they are and what they need a lot of the time. So narrowing your focus can really be one of the best strategies in terms of getting new business. So breaking down your strategies, we've talked about short-term versus longer-term, going back to your previous clients, doing discount and pro bono work and partnering up. Those can be your really quick fixes. And then the longer-term strategies, creating that content and narrowing down your focus, those are really the ways that you should continue to keep your pipeline strong over time. So wait, what about networking? I have said nothing about networking in this whole webinar, and everyone probably tells you if you want to get business, you need to network. But the problem with networking your way out of dry spells is it's slow. And again, it does not work well when you're desperate. It doesn't work well when you can't focus on giving, when you can't focus on building relationships because, again, you're anxious and you're tense. So networking is a good thing to do, and a lot of people do it wrong, and that's a whole topic for another webinar, but networking is not necessarily what's going to get you out of a dry spell. So really what we want to do is avoid the drought in the first place. We really want to do some risk management in order to minimize the probability that we're going to have a drought. And the two main ways that you want to do that are creating recurring revenue, having products, having subscriptions, having ways that you can bring in money that don't require you to do dollars per hour consulting and to get onto that cycle. But you also want to have 3 to 6 months of expenses in the bank. You want to have that financial cushion, and you want to have disability insurance, which typically is provided to you if you're part of a company, but when you're working for yourself, many self-employed people do not have disability insurance. And then if you get hurt or you get sick or something happens that you can't control and you don't have that source of income, it can be a big problem. So those are some key parts to making sure that you avoid the drought in the first place. So summing it all up, just as we wrap up here in the last minute, and then we'll turn to Q&A, the key here to avoiding a drought is avoiding that tunnel vision. It's creating balance. It's creating that recurring revenue stream, and it's keeping that financial cushion. And then you can build your network. Then you can make sure that you have connections, and you can reach out to those connections and look for work over time. But it doesn't start with networking. So those are the keys to breaking out of a dry spell. And I know we've talked about a lot of things today. I know this webinar is being recorded, so you can go back through and watch it again later on. But right now, I want to open it up to questions and to hear what you guys have on your mind and what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Katy. Thank you for these amazing insights. While we give a little bit of time for the audience to post their questions, I wanted to comment a few things that I found really interesting from your presentation. I mean, going back to the strategies for restarting your pipeline, I just want to point out the work that Zintro is doing to try to really, let's say, democratize access to opportunity for highly specialized experts, right? And so you talk about 5 strategies, and you say strategy 1, we engage previous clients. This is something that Zintro is really helping by providing a platform where you can stay in touch with these clients and where you can stay top of mind with clients that have hired you in the past. On strategy 2, create content, we have resources, so Zintro is trying to help you achieve these goals without you having to build all of this or figure it all out by basically bringing all of these highly specialized experts like yourselves together in this platform. And so we have the Zintro blog that allows you to write blog articles about your area of expertise or about expertise in general, consulting in general, all the way down to your specialization. We have our webinar effort that allows you to basically show yourself and attract clients through both the webinar and then the recording that, by the way, we will be posting in about a week, the recording of this presentation. So feel free to watch it again, share it. And this is how we help experts promote their content by offering a centralized place where you can go find expertise called Zintro. On the discounts and pro bono work, it's actually interesting because we have a lot of graduate students, we have journalists, and we have other sorts of companies that where you might be able to provide maybe a 1-hour phone consult and in a pro bono fashion, and in the end get exposure in the New York Times, for example. And so the pro bono might be, it's an interesting approach. It's a place where Zintro also adds value. It's not our status quo because we want to help our experts get paid consultations, paid jobs, paid projects. But it's interesting because a lot of journalists use Zintro because it's the easiest way to reach the highly specialized experts that are usually perfect for their articles. Partnering up, I think we're represented through the community itself. The fact that if all of these highly specialized experts work together in a platform and are kind of sharing the expense of marketing themselves and don't have to go through the consultant dilemma of either marketing or consulting, in this case focusing more on consulting, Zintro represents this strategy 4. And on the strategy 5, it's actually something I would like to suggest to our audience. Go to your Zintro profile and think about the areas of expertise you enter, because that's how we get projects and jobs to you. And so think about how well they describe your actual specialization. And if you can be more specific about how you describe your expertise, in other words, about how you sell yourself even within the platform, your results will be much better, and you'll get notifications for inquiries that are much more relevant to what you're working on. Anyways, I don't want to monologue here, Katy, so I think we've given enough time for our audience to post a couple of questions. I'm going to read the first one out loud, and thank you very much for answering them. So Joseph asks, what do you think the #1 cause of losing a client is?
That is a great question, Joseph. So losing clients, first of all, always is hard. And sometimes the clients themselves will tell you why you lost them, and sometimes they won't. So for me, the very most likely reason that you lose a client is because somewhere in the conversation you've lost the communication connectivity. You've ended up with a communication gap between you and the client, which has resulted in frustration on the part of the client. And we've all been frustrated with clients. We've all had clients who are hard, but clients are the ones that pay the bills, and they're the ones that allow you to do the work that you do. And so it's incumbent on you as the expert and the professional to try and understand both what the client needs in terms of what they say they need, but also what they might not be saying. And I also think when you're working with clients, if you're only connecting to and working with one person within a client, you may be missing some of the political factors that go on within the organization as a whole. You may not have the perspective of really what the organization as a whole is looking for. So I always recommend to people that you should try and engage and build relationships with at least 5 people within an organization, at least, and ideally more like 8 or 10, because having a deep relationship within an organization will help protect you against unexpected changes, because you'll hear more perspectives from inside the organization. So typically, I would say that most clients either get lost because it's a bad fit in the first place, in other words, because you're trying to do something that's really not the perfect work that you should be doing, or because there's a communication gap. And sometimes there are sort of more basic reasons. The client runs out of money, the client decides to go another direction. But ultimately, the things that are within your control are things like communication gaps, doing your best work, and building those relationships, deeper relationships within the organization.
We have another question, and I think it's a very, very big question. The question originally is, how do we copyright and own our content? And it's asked by Adi. I'm going to add to that. How important is it to protect our content?
So that is huge, and a super important question for people who are working for themselves. And I will answer it in 2 different ways. So the first answer, in terms of how important is it, it's very important to know when you own your content and when you're giving it away, and to do that as a conscious choice. And what do I mean by that? When I write a book, I own automatically the copyright to everything that I've written. So copyright of anything that you write belongs to you as the owner by default. However, if you sign a contract, whether it's with a client or whether it's with a magazine or whomever, you may be signing away that right. So there's a clause in most contracts called work for hire. And if you are doing work for hire, what that means is you are assigning not just license to distribute, which is what a publisher gets, but actual ownership of that content to your client or to a publication. So the first line of defense is to be very aware of what you're signing and very aware of who's going to end up owning that content. Now, why wouldn't I say you should always own your content? Because sometimes it may be worth it to you, for one reason or another, to allow someone else to own the content that you produce. And other times, clients will require that they own the content that you produce. And as long as you're aware of it and you understand the implications of that, it's not a problem. So just as an example, when I write articles for most news media outlets, I sign a contract that says they have the right to reproduce my content, they have the right to distribute it, they can send it all over the place, they can display it anywhere they want to, but it's non-exclusive, meaning they can do it, but I can send that content to another magazine, and that other magazine can do the same thing. I sometimes sign exclusivity deals that say, okay, I'm writing for Harvard Business Review, or I'm writing for the New York Times, and in those cases, it's really worth it to me to have that exposure. So I might say, okay, this article is exclusively yours to distribute for a year or a month or forever, and that way I'm getting something in return. I'm getting the exposure that I want. And then finally, there are times when you may allow someone to own your work product because you're creating, let's say you're creating a training manual that's really specific to another organization. Okay, I don't mind if they own that content at the end of it. I'm not probably ever going to use that specific content again because it's all pulled from their organization and specific to them. So this is a huge, huge topic, and I think it's really important and incumbent on you guys as experts to understand what it means to have ownership to your work and when it can be given away and how it can be given away, and to read those contracts carefully. It is important to understand what you're signing. I never suggest that anyone should sign a contract without reading it, and if you don't feel comfortable having read it that you understand what it means for your rights, then you should absolutely talk to an attorney and make sure that you know.
Great. Thank you very much, Katie. I think we're running out of time. We have a couple more questions. I'm going to forward those to you. Zintro members, feel free to contact Katie directly by going to her Zintro profile. Katie, on behalf of Zintro and our over 180,000 members, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We're going to close today's presentation. We're going to be sharing the recording of this webinar and the QA session in the upcoming week. So stay tuned to your email. You can also go to blog.zintro.com/webinars to find all the recordings of our previous webinars, including this one, in about 7 days. Thank you, everyone. This closes today's presentation. I wish you all a very nice day. Thanks, everyone.